days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime Fuego, and if it please you, join my quartet here for Bitter Palaver on Hail La 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 to Stephen King. Gracias, thank you so very much for joining me here, and bienvenidos, welcome to the horror show, where I do this program every terrifying Tuesday, or in this case, every spine-tingling, spooktacular Saturday. And I am making my return to an ongoing series that will be trickling through in the coming months here on, I believe it's the 94th episode here of Hail to Stephen King, where I am essentially counting down the decade-by-decade works of El Rey, that is right, Sai King, Mr. Stevie K, Stephen King, my favorite author. And I already did a countdown of the 70s stuff here, which you can see on the horror show. If you jump into the Stephen King themed episodes playlist that we have here on our YouTube destination here, then yes, you can see just my thoughts in counting down the first decade of King's work. But now we get to where King ascended to his throne, where King became a king. And yeah, that was the 1980s, guys. And this is where, you know, the onset had already begun with stuff like Carrie being made into a De Palma film, and, you know, Salem's Lot, and obviously The Shining taking hold. And so there was a lot of stuff that, you know, just as far as more film adaptations went, and, you know, obviously the Kubrick adaptation, which people have mixed feelings about. But the interesting thing about King in the 1980s is how prolific his work was. That's not to say that it still is not. I mean, look at 2017, all the adaptations. He puts out 2 different books, a novella and a massive tome with his son Owen. But the 1980s was definitely, as far as releases and films and everything, it was the biggest decade of King's career, and one that I don't think we have seen a comparable success to until this decade that we are currently in the midst of. And honestly, the Wheel of Ka in the 2010s is nearing its finish as well, but obviously I will not be doing that countdown until we are all the way through 2019. But expect similar videos like this for the 90s, the 2000s, and yes, those will be coming soon. I'm thinking I'm gonna do maybe like one of those a month, but I'm down to get right into it. And as you can see by all these beautiful books beside me, I'm essentially just going to be doing the poll, guys. And I have to at least start out with a couple honorable mentions, because King put out 2 different non-fictions in the 1980s, one of which is this baby here, that it's essentially just like a coffee table book. It's called Nightmares in the Sky, and all that King really does in this is he gives a little bit of text that accompanies this beautiful collection of photography by S. Fitzgerald, and it's all about like gargoyles and just weird, grotesque stuff, primarily shot in New York City, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, this is just, for a King completist, it's something that you have to have, because there is some genuinely creepy stuff in here. I'm trying to find like a really good example here as I sort through. And it's kind of eluding me, in all honesty. I mean, there's stuff like this, as you can hopefully see it without the glare being too craze-tastic. What else? Yeah, there's a lot of just like strange faces, you know. So it's not all gargoyles and whatnot, but you know, King just essentially, you know, goes into a little bit of detail here. Let's get this quote from him. "Look closely, because we see those ominous layers of the human psyche so seldom. They are there, these nightmares, but they are in the sky. Look closely, because even when you don't see them, they are watching." And so, once again, this is just like a fun little, if you're just a King completist, as I am, it's a fun piece to have. And it's not like essential ownership, but hey, once again, if you're that into King, you have to have it, man. The next bit that I have to talk about is the other honorable mention is, in fact, as we slink over here, I have 2 different versions of it, but that would be Danse Macabre. And so Danse Macabre is basically King going into all of the different things, whether it's television, whether it's you know, film, whether it's literature, whatever it may be. He basically gives homage and praise and goes into extensive detail about the stuff that inspired him, you know, growing up, but also, you know, stuff that continues to inspire him as well. He has massive reading and viewing lists on here. Reading everyone from Matheson to Robert Bloch. I mean, tons of good stuff there. He name checks stuff like the Twilight Zone and various others, and so it's a very fascinating just kind of read by our dude here. And I mean, Kolchak the Night Stalker being the first thing that I pull out to right here. So and there's pictures, there's just his insights. It's not bland. King injects his own his own sense of humor, his own sensibilities. And if you've read On Writing, which is King's book, where it's almost like a pseudo autobiography of sorts, but it's also coupled together with his just his advice to new writers, or old writers perhaps that are trying to like get back into the groove of things. And he has a great quote in On Writing about, if you're gonna write, you have to read. You have to read constantly, you have to write constantly. You just have to have those creative juices flowing as far as stuff coming out of you and ideas going into you. And I have this different version here because of the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, it has an updated yeah, it has an updated list of just like newer stuff, yes, it has a new essay called What's Scary, and then it's like a slightly updated reading and watching list. So I mean, yes, I have there's a couple different King books that I very specifically have multiple copies of, because that's why I've got Secret Windows down there, which is another nonfiction that just collects. So, well, it's got a couple different unreleased stories and whatnot, but it also has his introductions to a few friends' books and a few other essays, stuff he's written for various magazines and newspapers and stuff. So I love when King goes into the just realm of being completely real instead of storytelling, because if you've ever watched a King interview, he's a very fascinating, intriguing person. It's not just, he's not one of those people that it's like, oh, bump on a log, that total disinterest, whatever. He's engaging as a speaker, and I was blessed to get to see him speak live last year. But with that out of the way now, let's jump into the Stephen King tales proper of the 1980s. And so we're going to start at number 18 here with, it's, surprise, surprise, it's a Richard Bachman book, but it might not be the Richard Bachman book that you're thinking of. I really love the hell out of the Bachman books, and the one thing I have to stress before I go into all of these novels, and just there's a short story collection, there's also a collection of 4 novellas on here, but none of these are bad books in my opinion. Even if I was to talk about, my 2 least favorites again, very briefly, like Dreamcatcher and Bag of Bones, which I'm actually planning a reread next month in September. Yeah, you heard it here first. September Book Club Stephen King is going to be Bag of Bones, because it's an anniversary for that. But, even with talking about those 2 books briefly, I don't think King has ever written a bad book, but there is diminishing returns, lesser quality, but everything is pretty strong on this list, including our number 18, which is The Running Man. It's essentially, it's dystopian, and I love when King writes in the not too distant future. He doesn't really do it very often. I believe it's 2025 when this takes place, and this dude Ben Richards has a dying daughter. Well, she's not dying, but she doesn't get the proper medical attention, in this impoverished, crazy totalitarian, United States that he lives in. She's not going to make it, and his wife is whoring herself. It's like, it's really horrible, and it's a very dark and bleak book, is pretty much all of the Bachman stuff is. He gets onto this game show called The Running Man, where it's essentially, you get like this head start, I think it's maybe 12 hours, and then these hunters start going after you, and it's nationally televised live, and it's just a dark, grim, crazy story in a lot of ways. I feel like the Schwarzenegger adaptation brought some Heinlein, or not Heinlein, Paul Verhoeven is the name that I'm looking for. It brought some Verhoeven sensibilities, it brought some of that RoboCop vibe, and like what we would later see a little bit in Total Recall, but definitely RoboCop. And yet, I still find so much more merit as far as like just the gruesome and the crazy and the sad in the Running Man tale. I mean, whereas in the film, he's on like this course initially, and maybe it's not initially, but he spends a good chunk of his time, on this like huge playing field and stuff. Whereas in the book, he's like, there's like attacks at YMCA's, and he's hiding in ghettos, and just all this different stuff. And unfortunately, I can't spend a ton of time with all of these different books to cover. But yeah, just just because of the fact, y'all, that I'm placing The Running Man at the very tail end of this list, that does not mean that I think it's a bad book. It's got a crazy ending, just like pretty much all of the, and kind of a bleak one too. You know, as pretty much, well, not kind of, it's really bleak, but where they talk about, you know, the debris showering and, you know, the streets for like 20 blocks or whatever the hell it was. It's crazy. But yes, I still recommend The Running Man. There's even a little nod to Derry, Maine before Derry, Maine was Derry, Maine, which is kind of dope. So yeah, there we have it, guys. At number 18, we have The Running Man. The next one, at number 17, is one that's going to take probably some flack from fans, and that is this baby right here, Cujo. A book that King claims he barely even, if at all, remembers reading. It's one of those like stream of consciousness books. I know there's like breaks, but there isn't like chapter breaks in it, and I've talked about this book before on here. Once again, not a bad book, okay? It deals with, I'm trying to remember the last name of the family, the Trentons, that's right. And so you've got Donnie, you've got Vic, you've got that, I want to say Tad. But yeah, it's cool in the fact that there's so much Castle Rock reference. This was the second Castle Rock story. You've got a reappearance of character Sheriff Bannerman from the Dead Zone. And if you've seen the movie or you've read the book, you know what ends up going down with him and Cujo. But it's a very sad book in a lot of ways. Like the fragmenting family aspect, similar themes in The Shining, obviously, albeit in this one, it's Donna, the wife, having, you know, she's finishing up an affair. And it's just the strain that it causes the marriage. That, you know, Cujo ends up getting bit by a bat and, you know, rabid, rabies, all that stuff, you know, kills some people. It's messed up. The ending to this is so much darker than the film, but I have to say, despite the world building, despite the references to Frank Dodd and, you know, just the further world building of Castle Rock, this is just a book that's never done it for me. It's a movie that's never done it for me. I appreciate its iconicness, I guess, in the King Pantheon, but yeah, I don't know. Cujo just not particularly my cup of tea, guys. Sorry, not sorry. So, excuse moi. Let's get to our next entry. It's another Bachman book. This one is, where are you, good sir? That's right. It's going to be Thinner. Now, once again, Thinner is a Bachman book, so it's bleak, but Thinner's pretty damn good. There's a reason I put it over The Running Man, and it was like these three entries here, they really could, upon a reread maybe, switch things around. They seriously could. But Thinner, if you've seen the film, which was done by Tom Holland, no, not that Tom Holland, the Tom Holland who directed Fright Night, Child's Play. He also directed the adaptation of this, but this is about kind of a slightly schmucky lawyer. He's getting ahead from his wife and he runs over a gypsy and he gets cursed, and he's a gordo, he's a big dude, and he slowly starts losing weight, and initially, you know, he's like, oh, this is great, but then when he starts to get wind of a little bit more of what's going down, that's when he realizes, holy shnikes, I have to go after these gypsies. He hires like a mob buddy of his through somebody, and I don't know, the dark ending especially, it has to do with some apple pie. It's crazed, man, and for my money, I think that this is a damn good Bachman book. It was the last Bachman book until, you know, we ended up getting way later The Regulators and Blaze and so on and so forth. But, you know, I really dig the hell out of Thinner, and it's funny. I think in this one they even have they've got the fake little Bachman. I hope you can see it. Yeah, the fake little Bachman portrait and stuff. And yes, Richard Bachman lives and works in New Hampshire. A novel of unrelenting terror and growing horror. You know, this sold like a little over 10,000 copies, I think, when it initially came out, and nobody knew quite who he was, but all of that little poking around investigation about Mr. Sai King was going down at the time, and, you know, reporters are poking around in the Library of Congress, and eventually his secret identity, you know, his pseudonym that died of, you know, cancer of the pseudonym and all that stuff that they talked about. But I dig Thinner, I do. Just because it's low on this list does not mean I recommend it. And that's probably going to be a phrase y'all hear me saying a lot in this countdown. But yeah, Thinner, despite being high up, it's damn good. So let's jump to our next one. And our next one is going to be none other than, and this might surprise some people, I'm going with the dark half. And these kind of make sense to be Where are you at, Dark Half? Oh, Dark Half is way over here. So let's jump to this. You know, this is one that, I gotta say, I like it, but I don't love it. You know, it's not like Cecil Laird would say, shut up, I like it. It's very much a book that's tied to the Bachman mythology in the fact that it's supremely autobiographical. You've got this successful, well, he's a successful author for writing the schlock that a lot of people don't know he's responsible for. So you got Dad Beaumont, he's got, you know, beautiful family and stuff, you know, wife, kids. I'm trying to remember if it's twins in both the film and the book, because it's been a minute since I've read this one. But he is famous, unbeknownst to the general public, because of the fact that he's concocted this crazy character named George Stark. And George Stark is tough as nails, and, you know, all of these books that he's written about him, they're very, like, noir, hard crime, brutal, and all this craziness. And so what would happen if this imaginary character, when you do this symbolic burial, suddenly comes to life? I know there's supposed to be the suspension of disbelief. It's fantasy, you know, it's horror fantasy. It's a book, also a movie by George Romero. But it's one where I couldn't suspend my disbelief, really, as much as I wanted to. And all of those parallels, while I find it fascinating, I mean, Jaime Fuego is an alter ego of mine. It's one that I've eventually come to embody, but I've told this story to a few people, and I can't honestly recall at the moment if I've told it here on Hail to Stephen King before, but when I was first breaking into journalism way, way back, I don't even want to tell you how long ago, let's say like around a decade, I was doing print journalism. I was writing for this magazine called Playtime, which was the Playboy of the Southwest. And I was writing local music initially, but then I ended up segueing into national music, and they had me writing everything, you know, as time went on, from sports to dining to humor, pretty much everything except for, you know, whatever silly text accompanied the softcore pictorials of these women. There wasn't anything crazy in there, you know, just beautiful, beautiful women without clothes. But the publisher and the editor-in-chief did not want all of the readers of this magazine to know that I was responsible for as much content written-wise as I was. And so they're like, come up with some pen names and, you know, we'll just roll with it from there. And I had a ton of them. I had The Mistaken Genius. I had Swallow Sven, who was a EuroTrash asshole, and his articles were always really mean and scathing and sarcastic. Jay Pizzle was another one, but you know, Jaime Fuego was the one that stuck over the years, and now I'm pretty much simply Fuego. So I can relate to the whole idea of just wanting to be somebody else, especially in your writing. And Swabo Sven, the EuroTrash asshole that I mentioned, he was basically like my George Stark. He was my Bachman. He was my means of approaching things in a manner that I didn't typically do. And so I understand the fascination, I understand the escapism, but it's still a book that's never compelled me very much. And while I enjoy some portions of the movie as well, George Romero directed it very well. Once again, you trace it back to a story that I was never particularly fond of. So that was our number 15, peeps, and now let's jump into number 14. Number 14 actually has a very interesting adaptation as well. We're talking about Cycle of the Werewolf, which features beautiful, beautiful painted work by, or at least I think it's painted. Well, it's not quite painted. It's just insanely beautiful artwork by none other than Bernie Wrightson. But this is about a werewolf that is, over the course of a year, terrorizing a town in Maine. And this young kid named Marty, who's disabled, he kind of in time figures out who it is, and it's a very interesting twist in the fact of who this who this werewolf actually is and stuff. And yeah, I love the way this book is structured, and it's something that's unfortunately lost in Silver Bullet, which is the big screen adaptation. But I felt like they recreated the cat and mouse very well. They recreated the relationship between Marty and his uncle, who ends up helping him try to dispatch this werewolf. And the fact that they go month by month, each month, you know, each chapter is a month. And each chapter has a very cool illustration. And yeah, I'm trying to find the one in particular that I just love, and it's a dream sequence, actually. Yeah, I was actually talking about this with longtime viewer Eva the other day. And yeah, I mean, it's some dope artwork right there, yo. And yes, very scary. No, this isn't Wolves of the Kala or anything like that. This is Cycle of the Werewolf. And while, once again, it sits lower in this particular list, I love this book. I love this story. It's a novella. It's a little over 100 pages, 127 pages. Very, very quick read. And I also have the Silver Bullet here, which basically takes this and it combines it with the script to Silver Bullet. So that's you know, twice the fun in one. It's yes, it's pretty rad status. So yes, coming in at number 14 is Cycle of the Werewolf, and I do recommend the hell out of it. I seriously do. So let's jump to number 13 as I attempt to look for it here in my list. And this is another one that I think people will be surprised at the placement of it, but once again, personal opinion, art is subjective, and I am choosing none other than a film that is about to be remade by Blumhouse. Firestarter. Yeah. Firestarter is where King went back to his fascination, I guess, with, you know, telekinesis, you know, like psychic powers, this more so into the whole like pyrokinesis kind of thing, if that's even the proper word. It says here on the back, the Houston Chronicle says, there is no question but that in the contemporary realm of horror and the supernatural, Stephen King is, well, king of the genre. Damn good book. Not one of my absolute favorites, though. I probably wouldn't even put it in my top 20 of all time for King. But it's fascinating and very tragic and sad. Just the plight of Charlie, this young girl, played very well actually by Drew Barrymore on screen. And you know, she loses one parent. She's on the run with another parent. There's this government agency called The Shop, which King expands upon in a series called The Golden Years that I'm planning on doing a retro review of here in the very near future. But it's basically a road, like, on the run kind of tale. It's very fascinating the way they go into describing how Charlie actually got her powers. Her parents went through these crazy LSD like testing sort of things, and that's at least where they make the correlation that that's how she got these powers, is because her parents were like permanently altered and stuff. But you know, you've got Rainbird, I want to say his name is, yeah, and he was very oddly played by George C. Scott on screen. He's a Native American in the book, but yeah, that's I've never been too big on the psychic stories with King, you know, the whole telekinetic sort of stuff. That's probably why I don't love Carrie as much as a lot of other people, but that's still not to discredit this book. This book has genuine heart, and it really hits you in the feels, especially with the family dynamic, the love between parent and daughter. I'm trying not to spoil things here. I'm trying to get you to read these books, and yes, I gotta give a shout out to Andrew on the Facebook group Hail to Stephen King, because I know he is currently reading this, just watched the film, told me that he enjoyed the film, and yes, shout out to you, bud. Hope you're doing good. So let's toss that back on the shelfy shelf here, right next to the Dead Zone, which I greatly prefer. That's one with those sort of powers that I really love. That's, I guess, one of the chosen few for myself here as I rearrange my chair. So I would imagine a lot of people would put my number 12 ahead of, or actually behind, I should say, Firestarter, and that's Roadwork. Roadwork is also going to be in the Bachman books, which are right here. And so yes, the Bachman books along with Rage, along with The Long Walk, both of which I ranked in our 70s incarnation of this particular subject matter, and The Running Man. And so Roadwork is another, it's Bachman, right? So it's going to be depressing. It's a tragic story about this guy, I'm trying to remember his name, yeah, Barton George Dawes, and he loses his mother, and on top of that, he has to deal with the sadness of this freeway system getting paved through where his house is, and you know, the government officials are trying to buy him out. He's not budging though, and it ends up turning into this crazy standoff. You know, newscasters and stuff, and the story basically does this interesting flip where it kind of starts at the end and then does the whole flashback back to it. But he's a troubled guy, and the character of Dawes just really just bums me out, man. It's one of those it's one of those King books that it's like just looking at a car wreck sort of thing, and you can't keep your eyes off of it, and you genuinely feel very much for this guy. And I guess I related more so to him and his plight, and you know, just everything that he's going through, more so than, you know, characters in Firestarter. I don't have children. I wasn't a kid when I read it, and I'm obviously not a little girl, so and I don't have powers of that nature. But yeah, I may not be a fan of Rage, but the other three novellas in here that were written by King, under the Bachman guys, I adore, absolutely adore, and I'm very fortunate to have this beautiful, pristine copy of the Bachman novels because of the fact that my older copy of that is tattered to shreds because it was read so many times. But I really, really enjoy Roadwork, and I do put it over Thinner and over The Running Man. I wouldn't put it past The Long Walk, though. That's my favorite Bachman book, as you can find out in my countdown about all the Bachman books that I did at one particular time as well. So seek that out as well in the Stephen King themed episodes here on The Horror Show. So now let's jump from Roadwork, which was at number 12, to number 11. How lengthy does this go? Well, this one goes to 11. Well, why don't you just make everyone a little bit louder and just keep everything at 10? Well, this one goes to 11. Yeah, any Spinal Tap fans, shout out! Next up is one that I bet a lot of other people think should be higher. Once again, personal opinion peepers. And this is actually one that is being read by a close friend of the show. And that is none other than Skeleton Crew. Now, why is Skeleton Crew so high up when it has amazing, amazing stories like The Mist, obviously? It's got Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. I really like The Jaunt. I love The Reach. Oh my god, The Reach makes me cry, guys. It seriously does. Every single damn time. Oh, and The Raft. How could I forget about The Raft being on here, which is my favorite segment of all of the Creepshow movies. We don't count the third one, and I'm intrigued of what's going to happen with Craig Nicotero developing Creepshow as a new series for Shudder. That's a topic for me to discuss further in the future, but as much as I love a lot of the stories on here, there's also a lot that I can't say I'm too big on, like Beach World. I love Nona. I have to mention Nona. You know, maybe this could jump up a spot or two, but it's got stuff like Word Processor of the Gods and, God forbid, Survivor type. So, I don't know. Just like with any anthology TV series or film or, you know, collection of stories, there's always going to be stronger stuff and stuff that just doesn't live up to everything else that is on the list. So, I don't know. I just did a recent video about The Mist and all of its incarnations, so check that out if you love The Mist, which originally appeared in Dark Forces as much as I do. It's incendiary. It's tremendous, and the Frank Darabont adaptation is like in my top 3 like things ever. There's also an audio drama. There's also a Spike TV series, which I ended up not hating as much upon finally finishing. But yeah, Skeleton Crew. Hey y'all, if you would have it higher up on the list, that's cool. I urge all of you to make your lists in the comments below or post them on the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. Okie dokie? Yeah, that sounds good to me too. Yeah, the next one is gonna be a little bit of controversy as well. I can already feel it, but you know, hey, that's the thing, as I have said many times, you know, art and, you know, any sort of it, whether it's literature, film, whatever, it's all subjective, and that is because coming in at number 10 is none other than, drum roll, not really though, yes indeed, Different Seasons. And the reason I know this is a controversial pick to be in the spot where it is because of the fact that 3 of these have been adapted. 2 of them are considered maybe the best Stephen King adaptations ever. In fact, Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption is considered its adaptation by Frank Darabont to be one of the greatest American films of all time by King fans, by non-King fans, by like the American Film Institute, the AFI. I mean, for God's sake, it's universally beloved. The Body, which turned into Stand By Me, by you know, none other than the meathead himself. That's right, Rob Reiner. You know, he did a masterful job with that whole coming of age story and everything. And I love Apt Pupil too. You know, the one masterfully done by you know, none other than Bryan Singer, who's got himself in some hot water as of late, you know. But, you know, long story short, 3 of his most beloved stories, or at least 2. I personally, my favorite here is That Pupil, but that's just me. You know, Shawshank Redemption, wrongfully accused man, they say he killed his wife, and he ends up spending some time in Shawshank, which if any of y'all have been watching Castle Rock, you know that I've been spending some time in Shawshank on that show, and I have mixed feelings about that show. If you want to see full just disclosure and everything, we have reviews as of this filming of the first 4 episodes, and the 5th one is coming very, very soon. Yeah, that's for another video and for another time. But yeah, dude spends a lot of time in Shawshank, and it's a very It's a story that is like a fist pumper, you know? It's one that induces elation and exhilaration and vindication and all of these different rhyme schemes there. And yeah, I mean, I can understand why people love it so much. I really, really like it. Don't love it. Just personal opinion. Sorry, guys. And The Body being another one that is more so on the melancholy side and, you know, kind of sad, especially when our young aspiring writer, you know, divulges near the end, like the fate of his childhood friends and stuff like that. You know, each one has something different kind of go down. But yeah, it's I really enjoy the stories in here. The Breathing Method, which is the one that has not been adapted, is so weird and deals with this super private club of sorts that's popped up in a few different King stories. And basically, all that I can say is that there's a woman who gets into a serious life-threatening accident, life-threatening, if that were only the half of it, and she is in labor and she continues forth despite this crazy injury of sorts that's gone down to her. And so yeah, The Breathing Method is the only one that has not been adapted, although they have been talking about making a TV series for a few years now that was based on that club and just weird stories that these, you know, old guys drinking scotch and smoking cigars or whatever are telling to each other. But yeah, I would never speak an ill word about different seasons. All of the novella collections that King has done, you know, whether it was, you know, Full Dark No Stars, whether it was 4 Past Midnight, whether it's this one, they're all tremendous. But I personally, for me, there's things that I think are better on the decade of the 80s than this. And so, hey, you know, don't shoot the messenger just because I'm, you know, talking about the King stuff that, now this is totally gonna fall down. I can just see it happening. Yep. Let's just laugh about this, guys. This is gonna be fun to put back in. I should edit this out, but you know what? I don't care. You got to see my copy of the Gunslinger, which you know is gonna be popping up a little bit later in this. So, as we jump from number 10 to number 9, where are you at? Number 9, number 9. And you know, this is one that probably would have been higher up on the list. Not higher as in, like, you know, a lower score, but it would be like, you know, it would be, yeah, not as beloved by me if I hadn't done this reread. Yeah. Earlier this year, I reread Christine. The first time in a while I reread Christine, and while I have never been a big fan of the Carpenter film, I like the score, I like a few of the set pieces, like, you know, the car, like, you know, basically getting crushed down, and then, you know, they filmed it in reverse, and so that, or they played the film in reverse of it getting crushed, so it looks like it's actually regenerating itself. There's some very cool tricks in it, but it's a story that never really did it for me. Even the first read of the book, I can't say it did it for me, but when I looked at the plight of Dennis and Arnie this time in particular, when I reread it earlier this year for that anniversary coverage, because it came out in 1983, same year as our number, well, will it be our number 1? I guess we'll see. But Christine came out 35 years ago, and it's a tragedy of epic proportions as far as losing a friend, and how sometimes maturing we go in separate directions, and, you know, sometimes it's a girlfriend, sometimes it's an obsession, you know, like a hobby, or, you know, drugs, or, you know, whatever sort of, sometimes these things that dissolve friendships or make us at least grow apart are, you know, worthwhile, and there's something good to them. And then there's other times where it's, you know, it's an obsession, and yeah, this is a book that really rose in the ranks upon this reread, this you know, this year that I did, and it just made me sad more than anything else. And there's just, the book takes a different approach in the fact that LeBay, the guy who in the book sells him the car, in the movie it's his brother, if I remember correctly, but yeah, his brother is also in the book, just in a different capacity. But it's more like a car being possessed by a dead person instead of like just a car that is alive, sort of thing. And the way that they explain it, you know, especially with LeBay taking control of Arnie as time goes by, as he loses his acne, as, you know, he starts dressing differently, all these different things. It's a good book. This is a really, really good book, and there is a damn good reason why I put a book about a car that has come to life as high as I did at number 9 here. So yeah, guys, Christine. It's I I know this is one of those that is very iconic for many in the King Pantheon, and you know, it's not. Once again, this wouldn't reside in my top 20, but I still really enjoy the hell out of Christine, and yes, it is in at number 9. So now we jump to none other than number 8, and this is one that I am once again going to get a ton of shizzle about, because I have some people who think this book is better than the original. Not I, said the fly. Drawing of the 3. The second Dark Tower book. Second Dark Tower book is one that I notoriously, in my listing, once again, I'm letting you know about all the different listing and ranking episodes that I've done here on Hail to Stephen King in the near 100 episodes we've had so far. But yeah, I enjoy the Drawing of the 3 for the plot progression that it brings us, for the characters that it introduces us to. But I must admit, I was very jarred upon my initial reading of jumping into our world, and I don't like the Dark Tower stuff that takes place in Keystone. I just don't. It's not really so much my thing. I prefer to be in Midworld, and you know, I guess when they go to different versions of Earth that aren't like our Earth, I don't know, without spoiling too much, Drawing of the 3 is where, you know, if we're picking up with Roland, you know, where he's, you know, beside the Western Sea and everything, chilling out, it's got lobstrosities, and I want to eat your fingies, and all that stuff, and he needs Aston, and, you know, he basically starts jumping into the bodies in different eras of America. You know, you've got 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, in the 80s, you got Eddie D, addicted to the big old H stuff, thanks to his broski, mixed up with some really bad mobster-type people, Balazar and his goons and whatnot. And the whole jumping into the bodies thing, I still never really got that into. Here, it's number 8 on the list, and yet I feel like I'm deriding it more than I really should. The introduction of, you know, Susanna and Eddie is very interesting, and once they actually jump, you know, back into Midworld and they're chilling by the sea and everything, that stuff I enjoy. The Jack Mort bits, you know, what you think, at least at the time, is the third card that's being drawn, which it doesn't turn out to be. It turns out to be somebody different, who you saw in that Dark Tower movie. But, yeah, I don't... Once again, I feel like I'm being too cruel to this book. It's not one of my favorite Dark Tower books. It's probably like at number 6 or 7 if I was counting downward. But this is essential reading for anybody who wants to cover the saga. You know, you know, your journey on the path of the beam. This is the second installment, and it's at around 5 hundo, if I remember correctly. And actually, no, that's right. This one's only 4 hundo. But yes, I feel like I have been too mean to this book. I still really enjoy the Drawing of the 3, even if it's not a personal favorite of mine from the series, but it is mandatory reading because it gets you from point B to point C, I guess you could say. So yes, kill me in the comments, Dark Tower Drawing of the 3 fans. I know guys, this is the way it goes, and I need to get this back on the shelf because this is a very full shelf, as y'all can tell. There you go, Drawing of the 3. I still really enjoy Drawing of the 3. Please don't crucify me or anything over all of this stuff. So let's jump to number 7, and number 7 is another supremely beloved Stephen King book, considered by many to be one of his best villains ever, one of the best adaptations ever, also by Rob Reiner, same guy who founded Castle Rock Studios, the same guy who directed Stand By Me. We have The Plight of the Superfan, Misery, damn Rizzle. Annie Wilkes is the superfan who finds her favorite author in a car wreck, takes him back initially, and nurse Paul Sheldon back to hell. Nope. She is pissed about the fact that he has decided to kill off her beloved Misery, who is the star in this, they're period pieces. I'm trying to remember the exact set decades. It's kind of colonial sort of thing. It's interesting in this book in the way that they like jump into the story of Misery, especially as you know, Sheldon is trying to resurrect Misery to appease this psychotic woman who is torturing him, who is maiming him at particular points in the book. But it's very condensed. It's very frightening. It genuinely is. For a book with no supernatural aspects of any kind, this book, and you can see what she uses instead of a bat on the cover here. on his old leggies, poor Mr. Sheldon. This is a damn good book. It is very worthy of all of its praise and acclaim, and while they kind of cut back, in my opinion, a little more so than they should have on the backstory of Annie and just all of the other horrible things that she did before in the film version, what can you not say about the amazing performance of Kathy Bates? And she did a great job of bringing that character to life, one of the most fearsome villains the King has ever put to paper. And if you haven't read Misery, man, this was originally supposed to be a Bachman book, actually, which is interesting. Barely over 300 pages. This is a quick read. For Fuego or for a few others, this, you can probably read this in a couple of days. If you really wanted to take the Back to the Future approach, and if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. You could read Misery in just a few days. So that was number 7. Number 6 is going to be, once again, very controversial because a lot of people don't like this book, and it sits right next to Misery here. Also just had an anniversary. That's right, guys. Let's get it off the shelf without just dropping everything everywhere. I'm so sad that I missed out on the PS Publishing special edition of this. I'm going to have to pay so much more money for the Tommyknockers. Tommyknockers is a very similar situation to Christine for me. In the fact that first time I read it, and I think even the second time I read it, it didn't resound as much with me as I did upon the anniversary read of it in the last year. We all have demons. Guard, who is basically your main character in this, Mr. Gardner, he is a failing poet, drinks way too much, big time demons in this guy. And as somebody who has, dealt with demons himself, maybe not exactly of that variety, but we all have just things that we struggle with and things that can often hinder us from succeeding in life, in creativity, in whatever you're aspiring towards. And also his very strange romance with Bobby. He's his best friend and the one who basically becomes the leader of this cult of people being taken over by aliens after she digs up just the tiniest little bit of this ship and sets the whole town of Haven, if I remember correctly, not to be confused with the show that was on one of those cable networks of some sort, one that I've been wanting to watch because it's supposed to be super loaded with Stephen King Easter eggs. But as this town slowly becomes more and more under the spell, entranced, taken over by this long buried extraterrestrial presence, it becomes tragic and sad as you see the disillusion of this loving friendship. They love each other, and there's been intimacy, and there still is to a degree, but it's beautifully sad. It really is, and I love when King does sci-fi because he does it so infrequently, and he does it very well in this book. It meanders, as King often tends to. It takes its sweet time and extensive explanation. If I could really compare this, it's much more like a sci-fi version of it, focusing on the sci-fi a whole hell of a lot more. I love this book. I didn't love this book until my reread, but now I love this book. And just all of the weird stuff, incorporating the demise of Becca Paulson, or whatever it's called, the one that was in that Shudder at Your Touch over there. This is one that, if you like science fiction, if you like horror, if you've heard bad things about it, I think it's still Stephen King's best-selling book of all time, at least when it initially came out. So that is something to wrap your head around and to keep in mind. I love the Tommyknockers. A little over a year or so ago, I probably would have never imagined myself saying that I love the Tommyknockers, but I don't love the miniseries. Very excited about James Wan producing and potentially directing a new version of the Tommyknockers, as was recently announced. Now let's jump to our number 5. You can see that we're kind of staying in the same sector over here, aren't we now? Yes. When Stephen King goes full-blown fantasy, peeps, we get the amazingness. I've got fantasy on got the whole Zelda style going on, the Legend of Zelda, yeah. This was King fully embracing fantasy, swords, sorcery, dragons, hence the title, all that jazz. A king gets killed. There's 2 sons, vying for the throne. There's an evil wizard named Flag, and you know exactly who that mofo is. God, this is such a good book. Nothing scary about it. Don't jump in expecting anything of that nature, but It is so masterfully written. The daring attempted escape from, I believe the brother is, I know Thomas is the bad one, Peter, yeah. Thomas is the chubbly, easily manipulated by Flag brother who basically assumes the throne, and Peter, the rightful heir, ends up getting locked in, you guessed it, a tower. And this takes place in Delane, which was confirmed in both Wind Through the Keyhole and in Little Sisters of Eluria to be in World. So you've got in-world, you've got mid-world, and then you've got end-world. Not to be confused with Outworld and Mortal Kombat. But yeah, so Delane is not super far from none other than Gilead. Yes. So if you're into the Dark Tower stuff and you want something that's just a little less westerny, horror-centric, and just completely embraces the whole essence of just where Roland comes from, this is your book. And I am so blessed to have this particular copy after giving my last one away when I was doing some Stephen King panels a few years ago. Another of my white whales is finding the original release of that, because that actually came out a few years before that particular hardcover was released. It's very rare, it's very tough to find, but if you like Lord of the Rings and New Zealand, yes, you definitely need to read Eyes of the Dragon, because it is incredible. Now we're jumping into our number 4. Our number 4 actually shares some similar DNA to the Eyes of the Dragon, because it's also another one of those that correlates directly with the Dark Tower. And in fact, the Talisman laid down a bunch of mythology. Oh no, I forgot that there's this little tear on my sleeve. I guess I should probably be taking the sleeve off, wrapping my books in some sort of paper or a protective binding or something, and then when I'm done reading them, I'll just put the sleeve back on. That's a shout out to somebody really funny. But so the Talisman is the plight of a young boy by the name of Jack Sawyer, and this story combines so many different things. It's co-written with Peter Straub, who did Coco, who did Ghost Story, or it's either Ghost Story or A Ghost Story, British buddy, the Kings, and they talked about wanting to do something for a while together, but his mother's a dying actress, and this book puts forth the idea that there's adjoining universes, there's twinnies as they call them, so like certain people, well, actually most people, have twins on one reality and another like nearby corresponding reality, but then there's other people who are like super strong and don't have twinnies and they can just jump back and forth at will. And I mean, it's crazy, man. It's such a dense, deep book that I've wanted to see adapted so bad for so long. Jack jumps over to the territories after talking with this older brother who gives him this hooch, and he drinks down the hooch and he jumps into this other world, and he does the jumping back and forth kind of thing. He ends up in captivity working at this bar at one point. He makes friends with a werewolf. Wolf! I mean, this is... You first learn about the slow mutants, that show up in the wastelands in this particular book. I mean, there's so much important Dark Tower stuff, which is in this book. It laid the groundwork for so much that they would eventually get to. And the sequel, Black House, while not quite as good, is still really important to the growing mythology and the lore of the Dark Tower. And essentially he's trying to save his mother on one side, and then he's trying, to get this talisman on the other side, and there's a dying queen, which is his mother's twinnie, and I mean, I could just gush and go, the evil uncle, Sloat. I mean, yeah, this book is T for terrific. If we're gonna, the wonderful thing about Tiggas is Tiggas are wonderful things. So yes, if y'all haven't read The Talisman, I mean, this is another one that it's neck and neck for me, practically, along with Eyes of the Dragon, because I love when King just tackles fantasy, man. I really, really do. It's such a nice change of pace, as much as I love horror stuff. When King goes and embraces that sort of realm, it's just, that sort of approach is so great, and he does it splendidly because of the fact that, he was such a big fan of Lord of the Rings anyway, especially when he was younger. So now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, as I'm sure y'all know. We only have 3 selections left, and obviously through the process of elimination, if you know Stephen King stuff, you know what my 3 here are. Probably wondering what I'm going to put at number 1, because at this point, I don't even know what I'm going to put at number 1, because my top 3 King books of all time, they fluctuate. So But the unanimous number 3, though, is none other than this book right here. What started it all, guys? That's right, guys and gals, members of the Hail Quartet, Gunslinger. And I show you this version of the Gunslinger, which unfortunately has this little tear on the end, but I got it at a, I did get this at a thrift store, but I collected most of this from thrift stores. I'm like sad because I forgot about this little tear on the side, but I have both versions of the Gunslinger. I have this one, which is the original, which is in fact my preferred version, and then down below I have the revised and expanded edition, which King put out right before 5, 6, and 7 came out. My advice, if you're first reading The Tower and the Plight of Roland, where, you know, he's gonna go shoot up a town of people as he's after, you know, the man in black, and he's gonna encounter this kid named Jake, and he's gonna, you know, there's gonna be some other mutants in a cave. You know, it's similar to, you know, the kind that we saw in, Slow Mutants here. Well, anyway, there's so many correlations between all these books, and I just love it so much. But yeah, there's mutants in a mountain, there's crazy long-term tripped out psychedelic palaver with Mr. Flag, Walter, Man in Black, whatever, Walking Dude, whatever the hell you want to call him. There's some surprises in the storytelling here. What I'm not surprised about is the fact that they totally effed up the film. It breaks my heart and makes me cry, but all the flashback stuff to young Roland, you know, with him using his bird to go after his teacher Court. I mean, there's so much awesome stuff in this book. I love young Roland stuff. That's why Wizard and Glass is my personal favorite of all of the DT books. But yes, this has terrific flashbacks. It has wandering in the desert. It has shootouts. It has zombies. I mean, this book, you can't go wrong. And if you can track down this version with the original wording and many more references to our world, which King decided to omit, man, Gunslinger is just, it's a beautiful thing, you know. And this basically was collecting the different stuff that we saw in, yes, none other than, I believe it was the Fantasy and Sci-Fi magazine. I'm probably not remembering that correctly, but those installments were initially published in that and then collected for that purpose. So now, here we are, guys. We're at our number 1 and our number 2. Pet Sematary's number 2. Ask me on a different day, I would probably tell you otherwise, but Pet Sematary, yeah, let's break out this particular version of it. This is the anniversary edition that PS Publishing did. I don't like the cover as much as the other one, so you know what? We're going to look at the original cover of Pet Sematary. So my voice doesn't go out after like hour nearly of speaking engagements here for all of you on the Hail Quartet. But such a beautiful, pristine copy. I'm so happy about this one. Pet Sematary, ask me on a certain day, this is my favorite. This is definitely Stephen King's most effed up story that he has ever written. It sat in a drawer for a couple years for a reason. It's almost like a Bachman book in tone, at least in the end, in the fact that there's no glimmers of hope. Everything is totally screwed, and like, it's like people die, life is horrible, you know? I mean, that's really, this is such a downward spiral of sadness and insanity and various other things of that nature. It's a brilliant book. The plight of the Creed family is, it's heart-wrenching, and it will depress the fuck out of you, man. I am telling you, the madness that Louis Creed finds himself in, you know, this vet, or well, this doctor, I should say. No, he's not a vet. What am I saying that for? Probably because there's animals in it. But Louis Creed gets this job at this school and this college, I should say, and he relocates his family to Maine from Chicago, if I remember correctly. And you know, they make fast friends with Judd Crandall, their neighbor, and you know, talks about that world and all that, or at least dude from the Munsters did. They're filming a new version of this currently with the Starry Eyes directing team, and I'm very curious what they're going to do with. You've got John Lithgow as that iconic Judd character, Jason Clarke, if I'm not mistaken, playing the lead. And so, yeah, they've got some talent behind it, but nothing beats this, or even the audiobook, which was done by none other than Dexter himself. And this book genuinely scares me. It really does, especially when he is maybe going, you know, through a thinny, maybe going into another world as he crawls over that deadfall and, you know, goes towards those Micmac burial grounds. The stuff he sees, the madness that he falls into. I love this book. it's genuinely unsettling, which is another one of the reasons why I love it so much, and also because of the fact that it whooped my fragile little mind, if I'm going to quote, Cartman in South Park, because I didn't even see that movie till I was like 15 or 16, and the Zelda stuff up in the attic, man, it's just, it's nuts. But I have gone on for quite a while already on this video. This is probably going to be the longest Tale video ever, I think. It's just inevitable at this point. And I've even tried to skim some of these stories, y'all, so, forgive me, but, I've heard lots of positive stuff about the lengthy Hale videos, so more power to all of you who've stuck around to see what number 1 was. You knew what it was going to be. And the only reason I decided on this particular day to go with it instead is because it is just, this book it's much more epic than, than Pet Sematary, although it's tough. I'd probably put The Stand over this, but then again, ask me on a different day, that's the tough thing. But this was the most epic thing that Stephen King wrote in the 1980s, and so it has to be number 1. It just has to be. Spanning generations, 27 years, this group of 7 friends, I mean, it's just really, it's such a big thing, and there is so much, like, you want to talk about that we have additional expansion in Haven, and, just all the weird things that were going on because of that ship being in the ground and the Tommyknockers, like, this goes far beyond that in just the horrible, cyclical, disgusting things that have happened in Derry, to various other massacres, like, Easter egg hunts of tons of children, warehouses burning down, to, mobster shootouts of crazy varieties, to, various kids getting killed, disappearing, sometimes never being found. And, I just love the Losers Club so much. As I reread this book, the more old that I get, it's weird how I identify much more with the adults now. I identify much more so with that bittersweet feeling of just your youth is behind you. It's on the back burner. It's water under that bridge that Pennywise chewed on the melon, and it's just poor Adrian. Yeah, I'm happy they're doing that in the new movie. Well, not happy, but there's going to be a strange sense of satisfaction to see that on screen because they cast Adrian Mellon. But yeah, this book just, it fills me with such a just weird feeling of like just sadness but catharsis, and the way that friendships fade, and like the end of this book like seriously like just crushes me in personal recollection and sentimentality and all that other stuff, and the fact that it's also it's such a journey. And if you have only watched the miniseries or the film, you really owe it to yourself. Pick up either the audiobook, try to track down this amazing copy. Good luck tracking down this one down here from Cemetery Dance. It's the prize of my collection, essentially. But yeah, this has to be number 1. Even though I originally had Pet Sematary listed at number 1, how could this ginormous book, the most ambitious thing King had done since The Stand, The Stand barely towers over it now, in less than like 50, 70 pages more, but that's because King, re-implemented all of that unused manuscript that his editor made him take out and make it to 800 something pages. This is the most ambitious and epic thing that King has ever put together. It's a stark contrast to what makes Pet Sematary so special. And Pet Sematary is dark as night, whereas this is that weird in-between of just hope but acceptance, that things aren't ever going to be the same again. And God, it just makes me want to start reading it again. But yes, there you have it, your number 1 from the 1980s. Yes, cheer, all of you Pennywise fans, cheer that you got your way, that I didn't decide to, give it to the Creed family and the death of Gage and hey ho, let's go, and all of that stuff. So if I'm just going to do a very quick countdown here just once more, King put out 20 books in the 1980s, if you want to include Nightmares in the Sky, and if you also want to include, Dance Macabre, which he put out right at the beginning of the decade in 1981. So those two were, I guess, our honorable mentions, but if we're going to start with number 18, we have The Running Man. At number 17, we have Cujo. At number 16, we have Thinner. At number 15, we have The Dark Half. At number 14, we have Cycle of the Werewolf, a tremendous novella that I urge everybody trying to track down. Number 13 is Firestarter. Number 12 is Roadwork, another Bachman book. Number 11 is none other than Skeleton Crew, which a lot of people are going to give me crap about that one, as well as Different Seasons at number 10. At number 9, we have Christine. At number 8, we have Drawing of the Three, Dark Tower Book 2. Come at me, bro, come at me. At number 7, we have Misery. At number 6, we have the Tommyknockers, way higher than anybody probably anticipated I put that book. I love the Tommyknockers, and I grew to love it again with that reread. I actually love it really more profoundly than ever before. Number 5, Eyes of the Dragon, Embrace King, going full-blown fantasy. You go full fantasy, bro? Yeah, in this instance, you go full fantasy, bro. Number 4, we have more fantasy and fantastical jumping between worlds, but albeit one that compared to Drawing of the Three, I preferred this so much more, Talisman. At number 3, we have what started it all, The Gunslinger, The Dark Tower, Book 1. Number 2, we have Pet Sematary, and then number 1, we have none other than IT, baby. And yeah, so there it is. My ranking of the 1980s output of Stephen King. So I gotta extend a grande gracias, yes, the biggest of all, because this is probably the biggest Hail to Stephen King episode of all, ever. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be. I have been Jaime and Fuego, and you can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, exactly as you see spelled and indicated below. If you haven't subscribed here on The Horror Show, please do so. Porfa y gracias. Subscribe, ring that bell so you can get notifications about every day when we do 2 to 3 new episodes. Every day. 2 to 3 new episodes. Like, for reals. No foolies, if I'm going to quote South Park again. And yes, you'll get updates about every Tuesday and Saturday when these new King bits go up. Also, to remind everyone, we have a Patreon going on that is going to be gaining some Stephen King, Hail to Stephen King exclusive content that you will find out more about in the next month or so. And we are also fast approaching September 1st when the 100th episode fan appreciation of Hail to Stephen King is going to be going down. If y'all have anything that you would like to send in, whether it's a video, whether it's some pictures, whatever it may be, pictures of your collection, your King collection, something perhaps maybe that you enjoyed about this show, that you enjoy about Sai King in particular, maybe a personal experience of how you initially got into him. Try to keep it below 2 minutes, you know, because we're gonna have so much going on in that episode, from, you know, live Ask Me Anything and AMA. We're also going to be doing some trivia and some prizes, and also showcasing some stuff from fans. So it's going to be pretty dope, and I'm very much excited for it. I can't believe 100 episodes of this show almost. It's mind-blowing to me, but, you know, persistence wins the race, and all of that jazz, as they like to say. So I guess that is time for us to wrap things up. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos. Cinema. Amigos. Sin amigos. I hope that we get to see one another sooner rather than later, and until that instance occurs, remember, wait for it, stay scared, and read Stephen King, because honestly, you can't go wrong with any of these books.